is how successful you think this committee would be in terms of getting people financially inclusive. I said that because a lot of people at the moment who use banks and all of that, some are on the verge of opting out of such services because of, the kinds of charges and all kinds of bottlenecks. Sometimes you do a transfer, there's so many challenges these days, with different financial institutions. And yes, some people would want to opt out. Of course, if you recall the issue about the change of the Naira note, like the reprinting of the Naira note at one time, that made a lot of people discouraged. Yeah. So speak to us really how you want to encourage, those who are currently, using financial services to remain and, get those who are out of it in it. And then speak about the Vice President's engagement. I understand that the Vice President was involved in the recent engagement as regards boosting Nigeria's financial and economic inclusivity. Speak to us around this.
Okay, thank you so much. On your first question, how successful, how they can be able to foster that. You see, like I said previously, different institutions are coming up with different initiatives, right? And what this committee does here is that I've mentioned the membership drawn from different, space. So what happened here is that all those institutions, they will be very happy to, respond to the call when it is something at the apex level of the government, which is the presidency, right? So now you're leveraging on the convening power of the presidency. Then when I'll say, okay, let's come together and address issues. If, for example, central bank is having challenges, it is not that it is a compulsory thing that NCC or NIDA or FCCPC have to, quickly come together and see how they can address it. But now it is the role of the secretariat, in the presidency, now to be able to observe these challenges which we have been talking about, like Naira issues, redesign and all that, listening to people. Of course, while we are also being technical, we are also being politically mindful of what is affecting Nigerians. So it makes it easier, for us to come and say, hey, central bank, or hey, NCC or any other institution that is doing whatever they are doing, come, let's sit together, let's understand what are the people's voice, what are the people talking about in terms of this policy that you're actually bringing together, so that decision can be taken and change becomes easier. Do you understand? So that is to tell you this administration is quite mindful of people's outcry and then is ready to address the people's challenges, out there. So that is the attempts for the question one. Then the second one that has to do with the Vice President's engagement, in this regard, it is also follow up to the first question, because the Vice President, of course, being at the apex level of government as well, handling some of those economic issues, the chairman of the National Economic Council. And like I said, National Economic Council, NEC, is actually, having all the subnationals also members. So it's not about taking a policy decision at the national level alone, but it has to trickle down to the subnationals, isn't it? So at that forum, if there are issues that require the attention of any governor, unlike having to wait for the governor to understand this, then at that level some certain decision or his attention can actually be drawn, so that whatever decision that is taken at the national can also trickle down to subnational. So the Vice President is quite determined to see, in line with the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's renewed hope agenda, I think it is also his responsibility to ensure that we design such policies and programs to support the President's renewed hope agenda. And that's exactly what he's doing. If you look at other clients, take example of India, for example. I think they were among the countries that were being mentioned that they deploy what we call digital public infrastructure in order to enhance economic and financial inclusion. At the end of the day, there are so many millionaires or billionaires among the middle class, that were created, as a result of the government policy of inclusivity and access. Do you understand? So many micro, small, and medium enterprises now, now came up. They were doing crazy good things, within the country. That creates jobs. That spikes a lot of development for their country. I could remember within a short time that initiative was started in India. I think they added about $8 billion or so, to their GDP. So in Nigeria, we're trying to also leverage on some of this. I just mentioned India. There are quite a lot of other countries which this initiative is situated under the office of the Vice President. And the same thing also happened in. So just elevating it to some high level to show concern of this administration, because as Dr. Stephen, when he was talking, he did mention that for the first time in Nigeria's history that a conversation around the financial inclusion was elevated to the National Economic Council. That tells you that the administration is really, really serious and is really mindful of the concerns of Nigerians, and not only be mindful but is ready to address them. Do you understand? So that's why we now expanded the scope, where even though my friend here spoke about representing the last mile, but within the numbers, within the representations and all that I have mentioned, we have a broader, because everybody has his own scope. Do you understand? So the last mile, that is the poor and vulnerable Nigerians, is fully represented to ensure that decisions are taken at the apex level, and that is actually what the Vice President is championing to ensure Nigerians get the value for it. Thank you.
Is this the Indian model that we're adopting? There's nothing wrong if it works. India has a large population, so do we. Yeah. Is it the Indian model, or are we developing a homegrown model for ourselves?
Nigeria is Nigeria. We have to do homegrown in what we're doing, but leveraging or learning from other success stories is not out of place. Do you understand? Okay. So as you know that the committee was just set up last week, headed by or chaired by Vice President. So a lot of discussions are going on. In fact, the terms of reference and all of that has already been done. So we're going to go and hit the ground running, to ensure that we learn from the success stories, and then how can we customize it to be a Nigerian grown solution. Because Nigeria is also going to lead the Africa, and of course projecting to the world. Let me give you an example if you want. All these gender inclusion you spoke about for women access to financial services. We hosted an event called Gender Inclusion, which is an aspect of the ASWA Accord on Financial Inclusion, precisely on 30th January this year. We call it She's Included. I'm sure you've seen it all over the world, right? What is so special about that one? Other clients, other countries like World Bank and all that, they are doing like Wi-Fi code and other initiatives we are adopting. But because of Nigerians, they want to do it in our own Nigerian way. We design our own local brand. How can we now coordinate the entire activity supporting women to have access to economic opportunities and financial inclusion, so that we can start to lower? Similar model, we'll do it from Nigeria.